you brought up a really important point, and it's a really important segue to the other, I think, very informative study that was presented at ESMO about using therapies that are ineffective and the cost of switching to a therapy that doesn't work. And in oncology, we have to extrapolate and we have to practice where there's no data because many of our cases go beyond the clinical trial space. But Bertrand, there was a study also presented of sequencing different therapies, the CARD study. It was presented at ESMO and published in New England Journal. I wonder if you could walk us through those results and what are the clinical implications from that study?
So basically, I think that the change in the next months is indeed coming from 3 papers. The first one is Kimchi's paper on back-to-back AB and ZA, which is clearly showing that there is very, very, very little benefit of backing up androgen receptor inhibitor pathway one after the other. And then so far, it was an alternative that was validated because, like you say, we have to carry on with the patient. And beside the precision medicine approach, there is another approach which is technically makes sense, is to say what is the role of second-line taxane and especially cabazitaxel. And the CARD trial came very late in the development of cabazitaxel because I think the main excuse to the company working in prostate cancer is that they never anticipated that we would have like 5 drugs, so it creating a very unstable, once again, landscape.
5 oral therapies that would be used in sequence. This was not necessarily the way they were developed.
And the idea behind CART was to recognize that indeed we should consider that the standard treatment of advanced prostate cancer is to receive at some point one of the hormone and docetaxel. And really, I think that that's where really sequencing starts because, as mentioned by Chris, the triplets, the doublets. So we know moving to that same olaparib stage where what do you do when you progress on AB enzyme? And the idea of CART was to test that hypothesis, having on one side the pragmatic, what we all do arm, which is to give the other AR pathway, and taking cabazitaxel in parallel to that. The dose is 25 milligram because you have to understand that when we plan this trial, we basically plan the trial before we have the result of the other trial. So, and then patients are randomized, switching to receiving cabazitaxel. So first, the control arm. Once again, as mentioned by Chris, consistency. It doesn't work, or it works for a few months, okay? And then what is the difference with cabazitaxel? You increase PFS by basically 2. That was the primary endpoint. You hit all the intermediate kind of traditional endpoints such as PSA decrease, PSA progression-free survival, but, and that's new, you provide an overall survival, let's say a 40% increase in overall survival, which is a few months, exactly like in the same ballpark as the olaparib. So clearly, if that study should be considered positive, I would say hopefully it will be practice changing in a way that people finally recognize that switching the AR pathway inhibitor should be a rare exception rather than what they should do. And clearly put back in the fact that when you progress on an AR pathway, physiologically speaking, especially for all those patients who won't hit the magic bullet, going to cabazitaxel is an option which actually may increase overall survival versus switching the AR pathway. Now, I'm sure Chris will, there are a lot of discussion.
So just to summarize, this is a randomized study in patients with metastatic castration-resistant disease prior treatment with docetaxel at some point, hormone-sensitive or metastatic, and prior treatment with either enzalutamide or abiraterone. And they, they could have gotten any order or sequence of that. It could have been the docetaxel, then the AR-targeted therapy, or the other way around. They were randomized, and it was not quite 50-50, but there was good representation of both sequences, and then randomized to either cabazitaxel, as you said, or the other hormone agent they hadn't gotten. and we see this doubling of progression-free survival, this
Almost
significant-
doubling,
almost
you know.
doubling in the significant overall survival benefit, in line with these other studies, clinical experiences. What more do we need to say it is time to change practice and no more of this, AR, in sequence therapy? Or, Chris, are there exceptions that we should be thinking about? Does this end the discussion, or where are we
No,
now?
so I think two things. One is, I'll talk from both sides of my mouth. We need to get over chemophobia and not be so committed to hormonophilia, is my two learns. Having said that, not everyone's a chemo candidate, so you have to choose your patients well. And as we know, even with docetaxel and hormone sensitive, castration resistant, and cabazitaxel, the real world experience, toxicity goes up, efficacy goes down. So you've got to choose your patients well who you're going to use cabazitaxel. And it's very clear, if you're not having a great response to your prior AR, you've got some AR-independent disease, you've got clinical characteristics, you don't need ARV7 to tell you that, give them the chemotherapy if they're chemo fit. If they've had a long response to abiraterone and their PSA is going up a little bit, there's data to support the hormone switch, or even actually thinking that's the patient to sneak in radium because they've got some Tylenol or acetaminophen in their care because they've got some symptoms. But you can sneak in another agent if they've had an indolent disease. But as Eminem said, you sometimes have one shot, one opportunity, and you need to get the chemotherapy because a lot of those patients in CARD got chemotherapy later, but not enough and not effective enough.
And to be precise, the CARD trial includes patients who progress within 1 year of the ARPI. So it addressed that group of patients with a rapid progression. And the second comment made by Chris, a little bit more than 40% receive cabazitaxel at progression. And we have very little, for instance, information about the relative tolerance of receiving cabazitaxel upfront versus after another line. But I think to me the benefit of these two trials today goes more for the fact that we should think about adding an hormone. That to me should be kind of, once again, the rare exception. We have no 3 drugs, radium, cabazitaxel, olaparib. Come on, I mean.